Sabelt, known for their lightweight, high-performance real-world racing equipment, have entered the sim racing space. To mark the occasion, they decided to invite me, a overweight and low-performance sim racer, for a sponsored tour of their Turin-based factory and first look at their new Sabelt sim racing offerings. Before I give you my thoughts on their new sim racing equipment, I want to give you some highlights of the rather spiffing tour that I had of the Sabelt factory, which felt rather like a scene from a parallel universe Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, where all the chocolate had been replaced with car safety equipment, along with demonstrations of how seatbelts are tested, how seats are tested, and how airbags attached to seats are tested. The mega nerd in me really enjoyed this, and it was all incredibly fascinating. You could really see how much work goes into making equipment that looks nice, feels nice, and does a rather nice job of keeping your internal organs correctly organised should an accident happen. Most shockingly of all was perhaps the weight of the Formula 1 seatbelts that they had on display, with the straps feeling more like sheets of thick paper than actual seatbelt. I mean, it could have actually have been paper with seatbelt texture applied to it, and I'd be none the wiser, but I'll take their word for it that they were Formula 1 seatbelts. Now, Sabelt told me not to film this part, and certainly not to include this in the video that you're currently watching, but they also showed their top secret motion simulator, which is said to be the first motion simulator capable of accurately recreating the G-forces experienced during the start of your average online sim race. Currently, they are working through how to make this simulator work without needing to wear fancy Italian shoes, but I'm sure it will come to market soon and might even be demonstrated at this year's Sim Racing Expo. Needless to say, and probably as a result of Sabelt staff consuming far too much fine Italian coffee, the factory was ridiculously clean, well organised, and a great demonstration of Sabelt's high attention to detail, though a terrible demonstration of a proper factory. No coal, no child labourers, and it's unlikely a musical could emerge from this type of working environment. A great shame. New, as new as you can get, new smell. Following the factory tour, I then had a chance to try their new simulator platforms, and on display they had their new S-Series rig and their P-Series rig. The X-Series rig was too busy modelling and being photographed for a catalogue. What a diva. Hopefully we'll get to see that at this year's Sim Racing Expo. Now, you know how much I like T-slot and aluminium profile, with nothing really beating it out when it comes to racing simulator cockpits, largely due to the solidity combined with the modularity and adjustability, allowing for this type of rig to be expanded and adjusted to your heart's content. Despite aluminium profile often looking at the best of times rather generic, Sabelt here have managed to incorporate their functional design and styling into these rigs, with their custom mounting plates, the angled edges, and the really high quality finish of all the components. And I think really that's what makes these rigs stand out more than many other T-slot rigs on the market. Now, I have to say, of the cockpits they were showing off, I was a much bigger fan of their P-Series Formula rig than their S-Series GT rig. And the biggest reason for that was that this rig was really comfortable to sit in, and that was because of two factors. One of those factors being the pedal rest, and the way that the pedal rest has an ankle tray that can lift your ankles higher up, which is especially useful if any of you have used housing valve pedals or other high-end pedals where the pedal faces are designed like skyscrapers. So being able to position your ankles so your feet rest on those pedals nicely is really good. But the biggest aspect of this rig that made it comfortable is, of course, Sabelt's Formula seat. And I really have to say that they've absolutely nailed the design of this Formula seat, with it being specifically designed for sim racing. So as a result, it's not an actual FIA Formula seat, but that means a fat ass like myself can sit in this seat and enjoy the extra space, as well as the really nice back support and additional padding that Sabelt have put into this chair. Outside of that comfort, it also just felt really solid, especially when lowering myself into the seat, holding onto the sides of the chair. Everything was just rigid and firm, and then when you're driving, you can focus on what the car's doing and what's coming through the steering wheel rather than how your seat is moving. Don't get me wrong, the two other simulator seats that Sabelt was showing off were quite nice and nothing really wrong with them, but after having sat on billions of sim racing seats, I can safely say the Formula seat was on another level. Also being shown off was Sabelt SimRacing's new wheel rim, which is a partnership between Asher Racing and Sabelt Sim Racing, with Sabelt producing this wheel rim and then Asher providing the button box. Now, the wheel rim was incredibly solid, with some of the hardest and grippiest of grips that I've ever used on a steering wheel, and a wheel rim that I'd only really recommend to sim racers that like to drive wearing gloves. And with gloves on, even with high force feedback settings, this steering wheel is not going to be leaving your hands anytime soon. I will say though, ergonomically, for my personal preference, this was not my type of wheel rim, as I found the hand positioning a tiny bit awkward while shifting through the gears quickly, and I also myself prefer a little bit more of a shapely grip to support the lower part of my wrist. Of course, when it comes to wheel rims, everybody has different sized hands and different preferences as to what they like and dislike. And with this being quite a different feeling wheel rim, for someone out there, this could be their ideal solution. So credit to Sabelt Sim Racing for doing something different. So, 3 sim rigs, 3 sim seats and a new wheel rim from Sabelt Sim Racing. All high-end sim racing equipment, and certainly not for those on a tight budget. And I have to say, these are some of the nicest looking T-slot rigs that I've ever seen. But what really stood out was that Formula seat. I think it's a niche that's not fulfilled properly in the sim racing space, and Sabelt Sim Racing have got something quite special here. For prices and more information, make sure to check out their website in the video description. Thanks to Sabelt for sponsoring this video, and all of you guys watching the channel making undeservedly epic trips like this possible. Until the next one, happy tea drinking, take care, and goodbye.